Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to Enterprise IT World series of videos where we bring in thought leaders from different technologies and markets and try to understand the pace of digital transformation, cybersecurity, and the overall effect of COVID pandemic on the growth of the market. Today we have Pillay, Senior Vice President, Asia Pacific, Japan, Veeam Software, and Anthony Spiteri, Senior Global Technologist, Veeam Software. Gentlemen, warm welcome to you, and thank you very much for taking time out and speaking to Enterprise IT World.
So glad to be here. Thanks, Sanjay. Looking forward to the session.
All right, my first question is, let's understand the market. What is the sense? What is your sense of market sentiment in this region, Asia Pacific, especially if you can highlight some of the pointers on India?
Yeah, great, no problem. So look, I think the market, APJ is an interesting place to lead and drive business, right? Because usually when you look about companies and their investment strategies, APJ is sort of a secondary or third notion and motion. But when you get into the critical mass that we have, roughly about 450 odd folks in APJ, it becomes a huge growth engine for our business internally. If we look at the market itself, the IDC data that we saw, Veeam is growing 3.5 times the market's pace in the APJ region. And that too in India is extremely significant. And the other trends we're starting to see is subscription consumption. So a lot of our business in the India region itself is driven from a shift from traditional perpetual models to more subscription-based technologies. And I think from a data protection space, the innovations and the where we started and where we're heading with our strategy very much aligned to a market like India, which is rich with innovation and also rich in the breadth of usage of technology. Anthony, or maybe hand it over to you for a couple of comments around the market itself.
Yeah, I think the market obviously has weathered the storm, so to speak, and I think come out really well. We talked about digital acceleration, and I think that was very prevalent off the back of the pandemic last year. Obviously, it's still continuing, but what we've seen that do from a technology point of view is just bring us forward, exponentially in terms of the tech that we're using to do business. There's been more awareness of certain technologies, but also threats as well. So from our point of view in the data protection space, the fact that people are working from home, the rise of ransomware, that's helped our industry and our space as well. And, now people understand more than ever that they need to protect their data as it grows.
All right, my second question to see if any of you can answer is that digital transformation has become a trend. It is a necessity. It's a mandate now for all the organizations, starting from very small to very large organizations. Of course, large organizations, they had that mandate, but they were slowing down. And this time, because of this pandemic, it has forced them to embrace very fast, very quickly. What is the kind of trend are you seeing from a Veeam standpoint, from a BCP standpoint, from a replication or backup availability standpoint?
Yeah, so look, obviously very sensitive to the pandemic and its conversation, particularly with our India audience, and then use this opportunity to say, hey, our thoughts and wishes with them and everybody out there in the India landscape. But what I would say is if I look back at COVID-19's impacts to technology, I think it has accelerated companies' needs to, initially it didn't. So initially everyone stopped and said, okay, I'm going to wait and see. I need to be able to get my workforce to be able to access their technology or access data and be able to use that data. And that's my primary focus right now, and give people access. As the pandemic, continues to impact our business and world landscape, we've noticed that it's not going to go away. So it's not a short-term thing. And so if I look at the DPR report we published recently, 90% of companies have accelerated their digital transformation on the premise that this isn't going away. And now, as their businesses grow and mature, the ability to have or be able to have confidence in backing up or protecting the data you have is extremely relevant with the remote nature of how work is. So workplace in itself has been decentralized as a result of the pandemic, which puts higher pressures on digital transformation journeys for customers, but also being able to protect that data. The other thing I would say is when you look at that initial first phase of the pandemic, like locking down, making sure that you're driving your business. Now we're seeing businesses in a highly competitive space trying to attract and retain their customer base. And to do that, they need to transform how they engage with those customers. Again, with transformation, this pushes the need to have your data, be able to develop and put out new products very quickly. And if you look at things like Kubernetes and a few things we might talk a bit later, our strategy around protecting those workloads and giving customers the confidence to release new products to their marketplace and become more competitive in what is a very a new normal in terms of how we engage with our customers, B2B or B2C.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. See, the other thing you observe that people have been pushed back to the remote locations, working from home. So the challenges, the ransomware, the cybersecurity availability, and DC and DR challenges. So it's completely different, completely new to this to the organization from a Veeam standpoint. Uh, how did you ensure? What are your plans that you are ensuring this availability and security for the organizations?
Anthony, you want to start with the technology?
I'll start with that. I think the big thing there is if you look at our releases over the past couple of years, the focus on ransomware has always been strong. But what we decided to do is leverage object storage supportability, right? And through object storage, what we've done is we've leveraged immutability features within the object storage platforms. That then ensures that when a backup is taken, it's placed in a location that is going to be immutable, and therefore you're protecting that landing zone or that place where it rests from that malicious intent. Now that's a very big weapon when you're talking about ransomware, malicious attacks. So the technology that we're releasing is always focused on that ransomware. In fact, in V11, which we released in February, we actually took that a step further and added the possibility to configure a Linux repository, what we call a hardened Linux repository for primary landing zones, and that too can be made immutable. So it's very important that from a technology point of view, we understand what the market wants in terms of how they react to these new threats. The best way to protect against these threats is to follow the 3-2-1 rule of backup in terms of getting, 2 copies of your data, 1 off site. But more than ever, we're adding a few zeros to the end of that rule to make sure that you have immutable copies that can also be validated and tested. So that's a big play from a technology point of view.
All right. Okay. The other thing is that the scaling part of the customers, scaling part of the partners, because the new normal or new way of looking at IT or consuming IT requires a reskilling and scaling of the people, your partners, your employees, and the customers also, the CIOs, IT heads, and those people who are manning the data center, stuff like that. So how are you focusing on those stuff? You realize that today a disaster occurs from maybe a person getting affected by COVID. He is in charge of a certain technology. There is nobody to fall back upon him or that space. Is there any plan that you reskill the people in your organization from Veeam standpoint or your partner organization to support the environments? Anything goes wrong.
Yeah, so maybe I'll take a first stab at that. I think what Veeam prides itself on, and in the keynote we had from Danny this morning, is the same code that runs on his machine at home, right? Is the same code that protects Fortune 500 enterprises. And what that to talk about the skilling component in a roundabout way is where we pride ourselves as Veeam as a company is we don't have a services organization. What we have is a very simple, reliable, flexible product. It just works, and it is quite easy to work. If you think about disaster recovery, the complexity of some of our competitive solutions is what causes a lot of the challenges when you see some of these things that happen by human error and things like that. The other component, again, maybe Anthony to touch on for this his way, is around creating some levels of automation and simplifying or orchestration, which simplifies your DX processes, so that your disaster recovery processes. Because in the event that yes, something does happen, leaving it, reliant on a couple of human beings also is like a key man failure. So Anthony, maybe touch on that a little bit for me, mate.
Yeah, so I mean, the key part to that, number one, is education. So obviously education in terms of modern data platforms, how your software works, and making sure that in the case of a situation like you've talked about, where a lead person in a business that has knowledge is not available to do or transfer the knowledge in case of disaster, you have to make things you have to either write them down or automate them, as Shiva was alluding to. So what we have been able to do as a technology platform is look at ways to improve our APIs, our PowerShell, our automation ability, so that our customers can better leverage that to automate recovery. Now that is still not, it's still not 100% there, because you still do need people to actually, hit the switch and actually press the button and do the DR. But more and more what we're seeing is that customers are consuming us once they've installed the platform. They're then doing automatic recovery testing. We've had this feature in the backup and replication product for years called Sure Backup or Data Labs, which allows you to verify and validate a backup on an occasion. It does it automatically. So it builds the application up in a sandbox and lets you test it. And then once that button's pressed, you can then transfer it to production. So we have this technology built in, but I think the future, like Shiva said, is based around automation to get over the hurdles as to what you mentioned.
Okay, fair enough. So
the other thing I talk about is some of the investments we're making. So you said about the partner piece, and that's the other piece that cover off is with the partner community. We have what's called our Veeam accredited services program. So what we do is we make an investment in helping them skill up their skills, and we help subsidize their ability to pick up those skills and drive those skills so they can service customers better as needs change or work as we look at different types of deployments. So that's another component of making sure not only we're taking care of the customers, but also working with our partner in the Alliances ecosystem to skill them to be more effective.
Okay, but what I'm seeing in the market, a kind of disconnect, is that I'm hearing from many of the IT guys, CIOs, or the IT heads, that Veeam doesn't run, the training program certification and the proactively. I don't know. You can defend it. You can give a counter argument for this. Is it how are you positioned on that front, Steve?
Yeah, no problem. I can definitely. Yeah, we have a training program. We have an accreditation program. We have the VMCA, VMCE. We have Veeam services professionals. Well, we have a ton of accreditations. In terms of getting our folks accredited, we're quite aggressive in how we work with our partners and make sure that we're getting folks accredited. So I'd happily take up a conversation with any CIO. I'd love to speak to CIOs anyway. So if you introduce me, I'll definitely take you up on that challenge. But I don't see it as a thing that from a Veeam perspective. What I will say is Veeam doesn't have a very heavy services footprint. And that heavy services footprint comes with complexity of some people's technology. And so for us, there isn't this massive I need 10 consultants to go and deliver and install this this technology into an environment. And I come from my background, I've come from running services organizations for quite some time. So one of the funny stories when I joined Veeam, we run, if we're $1 billion ARR business, I think we have maybe I have one services person in all of APJ. So that it may appear that there's we don't do a lot of services and accreditation, but what it would mean is the product works in 28,000 customers' hands in APJ alone. So 28,000 customers, and our NPS is 75 and above. So I would say it's probably from the simplicity of the product, right? That it is quite simple. But in terms of do we have training and education available? 100%. We continue to make investments in training centers and driving our training push in all of our geographies. Recently in Japan and localizing that for the countries that we work in. So I'm quite confident, and I'll dig into that one separately to make sure that India is well represented. And if you give me any specific names, I'll happily follow up with them as well.
No worries, I'll do. Okay. The other thing that we just when we started, you mentioned about Kubernetes or container technologies. These are the new things, hybrid cloud, public cloud, and the container technologies are becoming the CIO choice or the customer's choice these days. So adapting to that, to the backup technologies, it's changing, it's evolving very fast. I know that you are doing a bit, great towards that. But if you can take me through your initiative towards the hybrid cloud and container technologies, protecting, making the data available, and it will be really nice.
Yeah, maybe a bit, Anthony, I'll tee you up nicely.
Yeah, Timmy.
Talk about independent of what the new technologies are. I think the trend for us has been we're always spotting the next wave of where customers are looking to drive disruption and innovation. So we started with virtualization, we're moving to cloud, we're driving the cloud response, and now Kubernetes is the next thing. I think that's the theme I would most like to get represented from a Veeam perspective, is always looking ahead, and our investment, so the Kasten investment is ahead of where we see potentially the India market, the China market, in terms of the use of Kubernetes. In terms of its real application, Anthony, definitely flick it back to you to kind of walk us through that one.
Yeah, and I think you teed it up well, because obviously it's a technology that's looking at modern data platforms, right, across the board, hybrid cloud, no matter where that is. The fact that Kubernetes creates is driven by the application. That's what's important. So for us, the Kasten acquisition was not just a technology acquisition, but it was a people and thought leadership acquisition as well. So we can lead the market. And the guys at Kasten, they had the reputation before we partnered and then acquired them of being leaders in the backup and DR space around Kubernetes workloads. And they're very big in open source and cloud native foundation as well. So, forgetting the technology, which by the way is amazing and works really well and is synergy is very real with regards to how Veeam is simple, reliable, flexible. They've taken those same approaches. But from a technology point of view, Kubernetes isn't quite here yet. It's being driven by developers more than anything, because developers are developing these new apps for these new companies that are born today. And these companies aren't going to be having a server in the background, a physical server. They're not even going to have a cloud-based infrastructure as a service server, right? They're looking to build new applications. They might be consuming SaaS, and then their modern apps are going to be built on Kubernetes, in theory. So we're basically here to lead that wave. It's not quite here yet. Kubernetes itself isn't fully mature, but what we will be able to do is make sure that when it does mature and when the uptick comes, when that inflection point hits, we're going to be there to basically be in a great position to back up those workloads, as we are today, in fact, with anyone that's moving to it.
All right. Now that we are passing through a very tough time, but we are definitely looking at a future, maybe a couple of quarters from now. Where does Veeam look at from a progress, from a growth perspective, investment perspective, technology advancement perspective? What are your priority areas for next 6 months?
Yeah, so if I look at the APJ business, I'll start with the three things that we look at Veeam as an APJ business. We're a people business first, right? So we want to make sure, particularly in situations in India and in some of the geographies where they're most affected, want to make sure our partners and our customers are in good shape from a human level, right? That's one thing that at least from my leadership perspective, is something that's very important to me, right? The second component is growth. Right, as an APJ region, our job is to continue to drive growth. If I cast my eyes at the Q1 results, it sets the tone for the year. And we grew 27% year-on-year ARR. But if I look at some of the bookings growth in each of the geographies, the lower, out of the 6 that we look at, the lower ones on that scale were still in the 25s and 30% year-on-year growth. So the expectation for us is to continue to grow. And so how do we grow? Again, back to that IDC data, it's about taking some market share from some legacy providers and working with those customers as they go to do more modern data backup solutions. working with them to help support them in that transition, help them have the flexibility with our VUL, our licensing schemes to be able to put workloads into the cloud, move them back on premise, and basically help them be as flexible as possible. And then the last thing is to just make sure that we take care, we have a very deep focus on our customers, right, and our partners. So we're 100% channel, unlike most in this landscape. Our partner programs and our investments in the channel community are designed for them to grow with our business on our growth part, which makes it a very exciting prospect to be a channel partner of Veeam's. And then to customers is to develop great product for them, right? So our development team and our R&D team has that core central focus of thinking about the backup administrator's life and making sure we develop products that makes their lives easier day in, day out, no matter what the challenge is that's coming down the pipe.
Anthony, your take?
Yeah, I think just very quickly, I'll just finish off by saying that from a technology point of view, from an R&D perspective, we're moving into the next phase of our V12 release. So that's now going to enter a beta stage. So you will start to hear noise about what's coming in our next version. And what we'll also be doing is continuing to improve our cloud products. So backup for AWS, Azure, Google, and obviously backup for Office 365. And what you'll hear from us in later this year is the announcement of a new SaaS-based offering as well. So we're not lying down. We're not stopping. We're basically continuing to expand the platform and continuing to enhance existing features as well.
All right. Thank you very much, Steve and Anthony, for taking time out and speaking to me. And we discussed so many things